Today I'm going to be looking at the Jakks Pacific 31-inch C-3PO figure. It's part of their Big Figs line, which they're sort of rebranding the 31-inch figures as, I guess. And it's just come out since Force Friday, as you can tell because of the Rogue One packaging here. I got this online, but I imagine it'll be showing up in stores shortly if it's not already there. I haven't seen it myself. The first thing I noticed when this arrived was that it had a lot of sort of just gold plastic. There's not much in the way of paint on this figure. I suppose that's to be expected with the larger scale figures, but still a little bit disappointing. Also, the gold plastic itself is not the most convincing gold I've ever seen. It's okay, but well, I'll tell you what, I'll show you this picture I found online of what must be a prototype version of this figure, and you can see how dramatic the difference is when it's been painted all head to toe, I assume. Or maybe this is just a different kind of plastic. Either way, it doesn't look anything like this, and that's a little disappointing. So the red arm here is actually made out of red plastic and red rubber for the hand. And it actually has a bit of a dark wash on it, which does help bring out the details, makes it look a lot nicer than the other gold parts, actually. It's a little too bad that they couldn't have done something like that for the rest of the figure. As for other paint areas, the wires on the stomach and the eyes are painted as well. But that is pretty much it. If you look closely at the wires on his stomach, there is some slop of the paint sort of going over onto the gold part, and there's some areas where I think they may have, well, had one color of wire sort of slop into the next, but from a distance it looks reasonably good. On the back in particular, it seems a little sloppy to me, but probably the best you could really expect from something like this. So, as I said, this is part of the 31-inch line. I've done quite a number of reviews now of the 31-inch figures, including the R2-D2 figure, which we'll be taking a look at in just a minute. But first of all, let's go ahead and look at the box. Rogue One artwork on the front here, and if we turn it around, there's the usual sort of product description on the back. In terms of features, all it has is 9 points of articulation, and that's it, basically. So let's go ahead and get him out of this little box or tray and see what he looks like, see what those 9 points of articulation are. So here we have him out of the box. One thing you will notice, or I noticed anyway, is that he actually has a ball-jointed head, which is something I have not seen on these figures before. And it allows for a greater sort of range of movement and expression. And, you know, I think this is definitely a nice little feature to have. Everything else I have that's a humanoid figure of these just has a cut neck where you can go back and forth, and that's it. But you can add a little bit of expression. There's not a huge range of motion, but it's not bad. The arms go up and down, obviously. He doesn't have any articulation at the shoulder, I'm sorry, at the elbow, but he does have wrists that spin, and as I said, these are made out of rubber, the hands are. Now, one other interesting feature is that he actually has articulated legs down here, which is something that I haven't seen on any of my other figures either. Whether this is actually useful or not is another question, because all it lets you do is have him sit very naturally like this, which is actually more than Anthony Daniels could do in this costume. I'm not really sure how often you're going to be wanting to do this. I suppose it would allow you to slightly alter his standing position a little bit, but on the other hand, it does make it slightly more difficult to get him to stand up properly. So I'm not sure if this is actually a feature that people are going to want. So the box claims that it has 9 points of articulation, but at first I had trouble identifying where they all were until I realized that it actually moves at the shoulder here, and then also at the shoulder here. So there's 2 points of articulation at the shoulders. And that's kind of unusual for this kind of figure. Gives it a little bit more freedom and allows you to do stuff like that if you so desire. So in terms of what the articulation actually gets you, realistically, you can have one of his arms up like that, which is a sort of a typical C-3PO pose. You could have his head turned up like that. I mean, I'm not sure how much you really need more than this for a C-3PO figure. He's not the most posable guy even in real life. While there's not a lot of articulation, I have to give sort of extra points for the ball-jointed head. Now, if we want to look closer at the head itself, you can see that the eyes here have been painted. There's no light-up effect or anything like that, but it works relatively well to suggest glowing eyes. However, there is one thing that really surprised me when I looked at this, and that is that this thing up here on the crown area is lopsided. It's off to one side. This really should come to a point in the center, and this little pointy-outy thing, whatever, I don't remember what the actual term for it is, should be right in the middle, and it's off to one side. It looks really quite odd to me. I'm not sure how that happened, to be honest with you. Otherwise, the sculpt looks relatively good. We have basically all the details you would expect. On the arms, we have these pistons that have they have some extra material underneath them, the same way as the little spike at the top of the head, because they're just trying to prevent them from breaking off, and I think that's a reasonable compromise to make. On the back, there are a lot of screw holes, which sort of works for a droid in a way. This is true of basically all of these figures, so there's not much you can do about it. You mostly see them from straight ahead, so it's not that big of a deal probably. So here we have R2 next to C-3PO, and actually he looks a little bit small compared to C-3PO. I think it's always hard to judge scale based on screenshots from movies and things like that, but I've always thought that his head should come up to right around here on C-3PO, which means that he's a bit short, but he doesn't look out of place, which is really the important thing. So I would say it's reasonably good. If you want to, you can even have R2 a little bit in front of him and have C-3PO's hand resting on R2's dome, which is a kind of a nice way to display these, I think, if you wanted to have them together. In terms of my impression of C-3PO compared to R2-D2, I'm not nearly as impressed with the C-3PO figure as I was with R2-D2. If you've seen my review of the R2-D2 figure, I was really quite impressed with the level of detail and just how polished it is overall. There's not much you can really complain about on that one. Part of that, I think, is, well, just because there is a lot of detail there and it's well done, and all of the colors look appropriate. The white, even though it's just white plastic, looks like it should. And then the silver on the head is relatively good. The blue is fine. So, you know, no real complaints there. With C-3PO, it's obvious that it's just goldish colored plastic, and that kind of makes him look more like a giant action figure, which, to be fair, is exactly what it is. But it looks more like a toy than the R2 does. You can sort of get away with thinking that R2 is a small statue or almost a replica of some kind if you sort of don't look at it too closely. So yeah, I actually have some plans for the C-3PO figure. I'm going to be customizing it a little bit in a future video, so look forward to that. Until then, thanks very much for watching.